Hello, guys and gals, and this is part 44 of our reading of Rod Serling's Twilight Zone, 26 Unforgettable Explorations into the Realm of the Supernatural, adapted by Walter B. Gibson. Now, we're going to go over the copyright information really quick. It should be on your screen right now. And it clearly says Rod Serling's Twilight Zone is copyright 1963 by Cayuga Productions Incorporated, and Rod Serling's Twilight Zone Visit, copyright 1964 by Cayuga Productions Incorporated. All rights reserved. This 1983 edition is published by Bonanza Books and distributed by Outlet Book Company, a Random House company, and all that. And the address is there if you want it. This book was previously published as two separate works entitled Rod Serling's The Twilight Zone and Rod Serling's Twilight Zone Visited, printed and bound in the United States of America, and the Library of Congress information is there if you are interested. In the last part, we met Christopher Horn, who apparently has gone back in time from 1874 to 1964 or something like that. I don't remember what the exact dates were. But anyways, he's in the far future now. And so we're going to see what happened. He is offered to buy pills for his son. Okay. Okay, could I buy those pills from bills? Blah, 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 blah. Sorry, could I buy those pills off you? I've got a real sick boy back in the wagon. He glanced toward the window. If I could ever find those wagons, you say these pills are good for sickness. It depends on what the sickness is. Whatever it is, my boy has got it. Oh, whatever it is, my boy has got it bad. Might be death. Oh, nigh to death, as in he's close to death. Joe was gesturing for Mary Lou to let Horn have the bottle of tablets while with a smile Mary Lou handed it over. It's yours to take. It's yours, take it. No, I've got to pay for it. Horn insisted as he drew some coins from his pocket, counting them, then placing them in Mary Lou's hand. Then, earnestly, he added, I know 15 cents is a lot for a bottle of pills, but they're worth that to me. Believe me, they are. Horn turned away abruptly to prevent Mary Lou from returning any of the money. It was Joe who started to smile now until he saw that Mary Lou was staring in amazement at the two tiny silver coins and 5 large ones made of copper. Look, Joe, exclaimed Mary Lou. You know how I've been going through the coins in the cash register, hoping maybe to find some buffalo nickels or Liberty quarters? These go back 100 years before that. These little coins are silver half dimes, and the other are big copper cents. They're worth a lot of money, Mary. They're worth a lot of money, Mary Lou. Maybe a couple of dollars a piece because they're all because they are all like new. I'll look them up in the coin book and check their dates. But why should this man be handing them out? Where did he come from, Joe? I wouldn't know. I'm beginning to wonder. Joe paused to watch Horn, who was studying the jukebox at the end of the lunch counter. Fascinated by its glittering chrome and the flickering colors of the neon lights, Horn's gaze went up to a calendar on the wall above. His eyes showed new interest as he saw the large reproduction of an old lithograph depicting a covered wagon and a group of pioneers. Say, that could be one of our wagons, Horn exclaimed, and the people in the picture look like our party, too. Where'd you get it, mister? Horn paused and noted the printed wording reading it aloud. Compliments of Pioneer West Insurance Company, October 1964. Horn broke off and swung about, staring at the young couple in outright horror. Is this a joke? He demanded. He demanded hoarsely. It's October, all right, but it's October 1847, not 1964. His eyes darted from the coffee urn back to the calendar and then to the jukebox and finally out towards the gas pumps. What's happened? What's happening to me? Where are we? Who are you people? I've got to get back. Okay, Horn sprang to the door, snatched it open, repeating, I've got to get back to my own people. Once outside, he was dashing toward the highway when an approaching roar attracted his attention, and he turned to see a red convertible streak by. As his eyes followed it, he saw a huge silvery interstate bus looming from the other direction, and took it to be another incredible creature. Singling him out as its prey, frantically raced back into the lunchroom, shouting, "More of those monsters! They're after me! Help me! Somebody help me! Tell me where I am and why! Help me!" Horn stumbled and sprawled against the counter, sinking to his knees, and as he turned his harrowing, piteous face towards Joe and Mary Lou. The uh, lunchroom, despite its modern gadgets, had become his only refuge. That much Joe and Mary Lou could understand, though it seemed impossible that Horn could have hiked this far along the highway without having gained some familiarity with modern transportation. But Horn's distress won their sympathy. They helped him into the back room to a couch where he sagged, moaning, with his eyes half closed. "I'll stand by," Joe said softly to Mary Lou, "while you phone Dr. Fletcher and tell him that we to get here pronto. Explain that it's a hitchhiker took down with the heat." Horn's moans subsided to in the quiet of the back room, and he was half asleep when Dr. Fletcher, a stolid man in his mid-50s, arrived about 30 minutes later. By then, two truckers had stopped for coffee and hamburgers, and Joe had asked them to stay until the doctor arrived, saying there was a sick man in the back room who might act up. Mary Lou had told Dr. Fletcher all he needed to know, and he went right in to see his patient. There was one thing that had not changed too much during the course of a century, and that was the bedside manner of the general medical practitioner. Dr. Fletcher must have reminded Christopher Horn of a country doctor of the horse and buggy era, for they chatted casually with the physician, took Horn's pulse, and Dr. Fletcher soon learned essential facts as the patient's condition, as well as his past life. When Dr. Fletcher came back from the back room, he sat down at the counter, took a swallow from a cup of coffee that Mary Lou had poured for him, and met Joe's inquiring look with the statement, "Malnutrition is this man's major problem. It could be responsible for his delusions, but he traces his imaginary life quite rationally. He thinks he's living in 1847, and he's anxious to go back there over the rim so he can lead the pioneers and their wagons to the creek over in Hidden Canyon." "And did you tell him? And did he tell you?" asked Joe, "how he came to know about the creek?" "Yes, he said you told him, and that he asked me to thank you for it. He said he'd never have thought of heading that way himself." "Did he say anything about his boy being sick?" "Yes, and from the way he described the symptoms, I'd call it pneumonia." Dr. Fletcher turned to Mary Lou. "He wants to thank you for the pills you gave him, penicillin tablets, weren't they?" Mary Lou nodded, but it was Joe who asked, "What do we do about him, Doc?" "I'll call the sheriff's office." Dr. Fletcher stepped to the phone. "They'll find out where he really comes from. It's puzzling, though. Those clothes of his are real old-fashioned homespun, like they wore 100 years ago. When I looked at his throat, I saw the fillings in his teeth. No modern dentist would have put those in. The gun he brought, that gun he brought with him," exclaimed Joe. It's a real antique, Doctor." And he gave Mary Lou some old coins. Dr. Fletcher waved an interruption as his call was answered. Let's see. I've lost my place. Okay, here we go. "Hello, Dr. Fletcher speaking. Is Sheriff Valentine there?" "Out on the highway. All the better. Radio him to come to Joe's Cafe. We've got a man here who needs looking after." "No, not violent." Hang up. Dr. Fletcher turned to Joe and Mary Lou. "At least he's as calm as any man would be if he suddenly thought that he'd wake up 100 years past his time." At that moment, Christopher Horn was calm indeed. He was sitting up on the couch in the back room, staring at objects that were only slightly strange. The electric clock could have been mechanical. None of the floor lamps were lighted. The TV in the corner wasn't turned on. Other things gave him confidence, such as the strip of old-fashioned carpet, a rocking chair that had belonged to Mary Lou's grand aunt, and a long mirror in an old gilt frame. There was a bookcase in the corner with a row of books, bound all alike. Horn thumbed through them, amazed by the pictures that they contained. For he had never seen photographs before. He tried to pronounce the title encyclopedia, and he came to a book that said Volume XI, which I think is 9, HAW to IVA. Horn drew it out, took up what he wanted, and rushed out to the lunchroom. Dr. Fletcher was examining Horn's rifle by the jukebox. He propped the gun against the counter and quickly asked, "How do you feel now, friend?" But Horn didn't answer. He wasn't interested in either the doctor or the gun. "Look at this," he exclaimed, planting the encyclopedia volume on the counter. "Hear what it says in the big book. Horn Christopher Jr., MD, famous for his early work in childhood diseases, including," here he stumbled over an unfamiliar word, "including vaccine research." "That's what it says." Horn looked up, a faraway gaze in his eyes, and his tone became odd as he added, "That's my son. That's Chris." Now Horn was looking at the silent listeners, meeting their unbelieving stares. "You want to know why I'm so sure of it?" he demanded. "Here." Oh, wait, he laid his finger on the open page, "because it says right here, born 1839. And that's the year that Chris was born. But right after that," his tone went hollow, "it says died 1914. And that I can't understand." He closed the book and added, I guess I'm either crazy or the world is turned upside down, but I think I got put here for a reason." He planked his big hand on the volume and he had just closed. "Yes, for a reason. Maybe to make sure that what the book says will come true. But I gotta go now. You've been kind to me, and I appreciate that, but I've got to get back where I belong." Horn glanced across the counter and saw the rifle propped there. In his limber way, he stepped over there and picked it up before either Joe or the doctor could stop him. But as Horn started for the door, Dr. Fletcher moved to intercept him. "We want to help you, Mr. Horn," the physician said. You need rest and medical attention. Come back and sit down. I phoned the authorities." "The authorities? Who might they be?" Horn somewhat puzzled. "And what was it you said you did about them? What was the word you used?" "Well, never mind. Just forget it. I've got no time to find out." Joe now had moved ahead to block the door. Horn started to shove past him, and Joe made a grab for the rifle, arguing as he did. "Horn, you've got to stay here. You've got to listen to the doctor." All anyone heard was the roar of Horn's rifle as it blasted. Apparently, it had gone off accidentally, but no one was hit. A big chunk of plaster fell from the ceiling above the lunch counter. But there was, but that was the only damage. Joe fell back, however, and Mary Lou screamed while Dr. Fletcher made a lunge for Horn. Too late. Profiting by the excitement, Horn had flung the door open and was now on his way. The only way that Horn knew was a highway, monsters or no monsters. He had to follow it back to the sign he had seen earlier and cut over to the rim from there. He was running fast at first, then, as he was looking back and saw Joe standing by the gas pumps, oh, Horn reduced his gait to a dog trot. Still, he kept glancing back, if only because Joe was shouting, "Horn, come back." It was then that the sheriff's car pulled into the service station. Horn saw this new monster in one glance, and in the next he saw it swallow Joe. Then, for the first time, Horn realized that those animal-like things were actually modern conveyances. Before, he had thought they were mammoth creatures trying to chase him down. Now he knew differently, but too late. This time, one was really after him. With that, Horn cut off from the highway, knowing that a car couldn't follow him. He saw the rim of the slope off at a different angle. He had headed for it, and he headed for it, hoping he could dodge from sight beyond some of the giant cactus and that loomed amid the desert's growth. There was a shriek of brakes behind him, and Joe and Sheriff Valentine sprang from the car and took up the chase on foot. Exhausted though he was, Horn felt that he still could outrace them to the rim, and that once there he would be on familiar ground. The sheriff was shouting, "Stop! In the name of the law, stop!" But he was drawing a revolver to back the order. During those brief moments in the car, Joe had told the sheriff that Horn had so far been comparatively harmless, despite his careless way of letting his gun go off. After all, neither Joe nor the sheriff could guess the important part that the rim had played once Horn had come beyond it, so they had no idea that some strange trick of time might work in reverse. But Horn was counting on it so desperately that when he was almost at the rim, he stumbled. In catching his feet, he lost the rifle, stumbled along a few feet more, and fell again. Something fell from Horn's Something fell from Horn's pocket with a slight clatter. He came to his feet, realizing that he had lost the rifle, and looked back for it. He saw the gun, rushed back to pick it up, and froze in momentary despair. Rolling down the slope past the rifle and gathering speed was the bottle containing the precious penicillin tablets. Without another moment's hesitation, Horn forgot his gun and sprang down the slope to scoop up the bottle. Hardly had he pocketed it when Joe and the sheriff were upon him, but Horn wheeled around before they could grab him and sped up the last stretch of hard-packed sand like a coyote. Sheriff Valentine and Joe were caught breathless from their own sprints, but the time Horn reached the rim, he was dozens years ahead of them. Then Horn was over the rim and gone. Horn's own sensation of those final seconds was drowned in a mottled whirl of gray in which the dazzling whiteness of the desert sand alternated with the blackness of a fainting spell brought on through sheer exhaustion. This time Horn sprawled and stayed a while, closing his eyes and shutting out that patchy gray impression and trying to gather his numbed recollections. Out of the whirl, he experienced the sheriff's hand. He expected the sheriff's hand to clamp his shoulder in a friendly way, perhaps, yet one that would insist on hauling him off into a strange world where he didn't want to be. But no clamp came, and Horn opened his eyes, hopefully to find himself in a world where he really belonged. Below were the wagons, with some of the men starting to build a campfire in a slow, half-hearted way, as though they intended to go nowhere. Horn looked for his rifle and was puzzled when he didn't have it. Vaguely, he recalled dropping it in the mad dash back up to the rim. Then he remembered accidentally firing it in Joe's cafe. Maybe he'd really dropped it then, though the whole scene was too crazy to be real. Then his mind reverted back farther to the shot he'd fired when he dodged the monster that roared along the path, as hard as a rock, wide as a river, and smooth as a billiard table, and lined with dead trees strung together with miles of ropes. Maybe he dropped the rifle then, when he wounded himself in the arm. Or had it happened at all? Horn looked at his arm now and found that he was no longer wearing his improvised sling, nor had his shirt sleeve torn. In fact, the wound was only in his imagination, but he'd lost his rifle, that was certain. Horn shook his head and started down to the wagons. With every step, his whole adventure seemed crazier, so he decided not to talk about it. In fact, the less he thought about it, the better, except for two things that was literally branded in his mind. One thing was something someone had told him about a creek in Hidden Canyon, only 5 miles across the desert, between a double row of hills that looked too barren for anyone to hope for water there. There was something else that Horn remembered, as though he had read it somewhere. He was repeating it half aloud. Horn, Christopher Jr., born 1839, died. The words themselves, died on Horn's parched lips. He was going to say died in 1847, but he amended it to fit with the fantastic fact that had somehow burrowed into its way into his brain. Born 1839, died 1914. Now Horn was telling himself exactly what it all meant, speaking softly as though rehearsing it. We're going to find water in the hills, so we'll all live to see California, including Chris. A harrowing thought gripped Horn, causing him to wonder if the thing he had read could be wrong. He had forgotten something more important even than his rifle, which now he considered hopelessly lost. He thrust his hand in his pocket. The pocket of his jacket clutched the object they found that and brought it out to stare at it with a happy smile. It was a bottle that someone had given him, still containing its precious pills that some doctor had practically prescribed for little Chris. Horn passed the man by the half-made campfire and reached his own wagon. There Martha met him with the question, "Did you forget something, Chris?" "Why, no," he replied, except I most forgot where the wagons were. That's why I was so long getting back. But you haven't been gone long. You couldn't have gone any farther than just beyond the rim. That's why I asked if you forgot something and had to come back." "No, I didn't forget anything," Horner returned. "I came back because I remembered something. These." He placed a bottle of pills in Martha's hand, and while she studied them wonderingly, she added, "Give 2 of these to little Chris. We'll repeat the dose at intervals. I think it may save his life. In fact, I'm sure it will, Martha." Martha nodded, though she didn't exactly understand. Still, she didn't question her husband further. He had a way of picking up information about the trail, odd facts about Native Americans and weather, even remedies such as these pills might be, and then forgetting them until the time came when they were needed. The fact that the pills were in an odd-looking bottle with a peculiar type of cap only made Martha decide that they might come up to Horn's claims. "I'll have to get the boy some water with the pills," she reminded him. "Take all you need." Horn gestured to the sheepskin bag. "Bathe his forehead, too, and when the bag runs dry, get more water from the barrel. We're going to where there's water, plenty of it." Horn stalked over to where the men were still building their campfire. Bluntly, he told them, "Save yourself the trouble, boys. We're hitting the trail at sundown." The men began to grumble, and Charlie Crowell gruffly interpreted their sentiment. What trail?" he demanded. And for how far? Don't you know that these men and horses are so weak they can't keep going for more than a couple of hours?" "And that's all the time we need," Horn retorted, "to get to where water is." "Don't tell us you went and found water, Chris. Why, you weren't hardly gone beyond the rim before you came stumbling back like you were the most tuckered out hombre in the party." Um, I didn't have to go farther. I saw where the water was." "You mean you saw a mirage, like a lake off there in the desert?" "That's no good, Chris." Charlie turned to the others. "We need a new man to run this outfit instead of this guy who comes stumbling back like he's got the blind staggers, saying he's seen a lake out in the middle of the desert." Under Horn's stern surface lay an ironical humor that he could use to advantage when needed. He proved it now. "I said nothing about a lake." He gave a dry chuckle. "You were the ones who brought that up, Charlie. Maybe you've been seeing mirages. I haven't. But you said you saw water." "Wrong again, Charlie. I said I saw where the water was, right, boys?" Horn turned to the men, who mumbled their agreement. "What I saw was hills. No mirage ever looked like hills." "And why?" asked Charlie. "Should we find water there?" "Because not long back a fellow told me we'd find a creek in a hidden canyon past a ridge of hills, just like those I saw." "Why didn't you tell us sooner, Chris?" Horn shook his head. I wanted to see them first Myself, I hoped I'd see them when I got beyond the rim. And sure enough, there they were. So let's hitch up and get started. Horn's convincing words roused the listeners to new spirit. Even Charlie was won over, though to save face, he inquired with a pleasant laugh, "Was there anything else to see besides hills, Chris?" "There's a lot to be seen beyond the rim," replied Horn solemnly. "There's a whole new land and people like us will be responsible for. There will be big roads, huge machines like monsters, pipelines bringing water to the middle of the desert." He broke off rather than carry his glowing speech too far. It wouldn't do to strain the imagination of these listeners. Horn snapped from the fantasy of 1964 back to the realism of 1847. The horses were hitched now, and he climbed to the front of the wagon as he added, "Of course, we won't live to see any of that. Even our children will only see the beginning of it." Horn looked back at Martha, who was helping little Chris sit up, and though then he flicked the reins. "Giddy up, boys. We're stopping off at Hidden Canyon, then on to California." And that's going to do it for our reading of Rod Serling's Twilight Zone, 26 Unforgettable Explorations of the Realm of the Supernatural, adapted by Walter B. Gibson, and we've been specifically reading Beyond the Rim. If you like this content, make sure you like and subscribe and ring the bell so you know when I upload. Also, want to support me in any way, if you want to join the Discord server, all that information will be in the description below. And thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day.